Scientific Illustrator Stephanie Rozzo. Welcome to Nature Sketch Create's BlueEyed Grass instructional video. In this video, I'll be showing you how to paint the BlueEyed Grass by using Nature Sketch Create's step-by-step instructions. You can follow along with this lesson even if you don't have a lesson kit. You can help this tiny business by clicking that like button, subscribing to this YouTube channel, and shopping for lesson creates at naturesketchcreate.com. First, make sure you have all the materials you need before you start. Remember, this is just a sketch. Take your time, relax, and don't get too caught up if you think you might have made a mistake. Let's get started. Step 1, transfer the image to the watercolor paper. So you want to tape the transfer image to the back of the watercolor paper, and you can do it on any side, but I find the top helps for positioning. And you don't want to cover up any of the lines you plan on transferring. So if you plan on transferring the whole bunch lines, you may want to put it on the side after all. Then take your graphite transfer paper, and you want that the dark side down, light side up, and this can be used over and over. You see I used it for my step-by-step panda demonstration. And you'll place that on top of the watercolor paper. Gently press down on the transfer image, and then just start anywhere you want and draw one line or a couple, the medium pressure, and then hold it down gently on one side and flip that up and see that it's transferring dark enough. So you want it dark enough that you can see the lines after you paint a few layers of paint for the step-by-step painting. That way you can draw them after you're done painting with the micron ink pens. So it could be a little lighter than that. It doesn't have to be quite that dark. So you want to go ahead and go over the lines. You can hold down one end gently to make sure your papers don't move around. Just trace right over those lines to transfer them. This is meant to be meditative and relaxing. So go ahead and put on a podcast, audiobook, some music, or transfer the lines outside and just listen to nature. And don't worry too much if you don't trace over them exactly. This is just a sketch, and it will be imperfectly perfect. So just trace over those lines to transfer them. When you think you have all the lines transferred, you want to again hold down one corner gently and then flip the image up and down like a flip book to see if you've transferred all the lines. You can add in any that you have missed. And I usually start with my eyes on one part and then move my eyes through the image while I'm flipping the paper up and down. I always end up missing something. If you want to keep track of your lines a little bit better, you may want to try using a colored fine tip pen or colored fine tip pencil. Then you can tell which lines you've transferred. The pencil line tends to blend in with the black line pretty well, making it hard to see. I'm going to go ahead and transfer the common name and scientific names. Is totally optional. And the common name, BlueEyed Grass, is a little bit bigger than my pencil tip, so I'm just drawing on the outside of that black line, kind of an outline of the black. And in order to transfer the scientific name, which is italics underneath the common name, I'm just going to go ahead and write right over it since it's about the same size as my pencil tip. I'm going to go ahead and remove the graphite transfer paper. And then I'm going to remove the tape from the back of my watercolor paper. I'm going to take the tape off. And since it didn't leave much paper residue, or looks like any paper residue, I'm going to go ahead and keep this so I can use it again later. And I'm going to keep this transfer image too. It's going to help me at the end if I want to redraw the lines, and if I want to protect my image while I'm painting it, I can put it down so that I don't get any smudge marks from my hand just over different areas, or maybe paint spatterings while I'm mixing. I'm going to set that aside for now. We have our kneaded eraser. I'm going to knead it to a light gray spot. And you will want to use a kneaded eraser instead of a regular eraser, because a kneaded eraser is gentler on the watercolor paper, which is very fragile. And you want the watercolor paper to preserve its qualities. And you can do that by using this kneaded eraser to erase marks. And you can either use it to dab or rub. Dabbing will lighten the marks. Just make sure before you use it, you knead it to a light gray spot so it doesn't transfer any graphite to your image. It just takes it off. This paper came with a little spot in there, which is totally fine. These lines don't look too dark to me. I think this is ready for adding some paint. Step 2, paint in the grass yellow and purple. So first you want to mix the grass yellow, which is just going to be the 1H Hansa yellow light. I'm not going to need a lot. I'm just going to take 1 drop. You can add 2 drops or whatever helps out or works best for you. And I'm not going to add water to it. I'm just going to kind of move it around in my palette. There'll be a tiny bit of water, but I'm not going to actually press the barrel of my brush. I'm going to just have a damp brush that I'm going to add that to that paint. I'm going to dab it off onto my towel and test it out. And it's still a bit dark, so I'm going to add just a little bit of water, by probably a little tiny drop. So add that in. And if you have a regular paintbrush, you can just add it by using a little water container next to your paint palette and dip your brush and add it to the palette. Test that out. That looks better. It's not quite as concentrated, just slightly a little bit less. And I'm just going to add it here, like I see in step 2's image, to the center of the flower. And then I'm going to add it in here as well. And if you get paint outside of the lines, that's totally fine. If you need a finer tip, just roll your tip on your towel. And I'm just adding this kind of like I would be with a pen or marker or crayon, just moving that color through the space. The difference is you want to have one continuous line of color. So you want to start at one spot and just bring that all the way down in the space. We break it up from space to space. So one shape, I fill that in, and then I move on to the next. Bringing the paint all the way down into that shape. And at any time you can pick up more paint. Dab it off on your towel and then continue. Go ahead and clean off my brush. I don't want that yellow to be there, so wait till it's clear on my towel. Actually, quite a bit of yellow pigment. Looks like that's about close to getting right. Fold my towel over again. You can fill up your water brush at any time. I used all the water in the barrel of this brush, cleaning it off. Looks good now. So next I'll mix the grass purple. So I'll take 1 drop of the 9H Cobalt Violet. It's a good idea to shake these paints up. Sometimes the pigment settles on the sides. That way you get the full concentration of the color. Drop in there. And with these lessons, I'm talking about being wet, talking about more water added to it in the palette versus dry having more pigment and less water. So it's all in the palette, so it makes a darker color when there's more pigment. We add water to it in the palette, it'll dilute it, creating a lighter color. I'm going to create a super dark, medium dark, and a lighter color. Clean off the brush. Test that out and see if it's dark enough or dry enough, have enough pigment to it. I think that looks good. Pick it up again, and I want a fine tip, so again I'm going to roll that on my towel, and then I'm just going to apply it onto these lines of my flower. Again, don't worry too much about being exact. This is just a sketch. I'm going to clean off my brush. One thing to note though is that the sepals are a little bit wider than the petals, and they have 5 of these little lines, whereas the petals are a little bit narrower and they have 3 of these little lines. Then I'm going to go ahead and let this dry and move on to step 3. Step 3, paint in the grass green. So you want to go ahead and mix the grass green, and it takes a lot of this Hansa yellow light, 25 drops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. 1 drop the 28H Carmine. And 1 drop the Phthalo Blue. Go ahead and mix that up. Dab it off onto my towel and test it out. It looks good. I'm going to go ahead and test it out here. It looks good. Mix it up just a little bit more. Clean off my brush, and I'm going to take the wettest, lightest version of this color. So I'm adding a lot of water to it in my palette. Test it out one more time. I'm going to add it to all the areas that are green in step 3's image. So I'm going to try to preserve some of the yellow along the edges of all the areas on this plant. This green color. So I'm kind of painting through the center of these stems here. And I'm dabbing this off onto my towel each time I pick up paint. I didn't make this line area wide enough, so I'm just going to add a little bit of paint there, and I'll change it later with my ink lines in step 7. I also add a little pencil line there too to create little light marks to guide me throughout the rest of the painting. These little mistakes make everything perfectly imperfect. No reason to worry too much about them. It's just going to make this painting more unique and special to you. Now we'll move on to step 4. Step 4, paint in the grass purple and brown. So take some of that grass purple, again it's the wettest, lightest color. Test it out to make sure it didn't dry up too much and become too concentrated. Looks pretty good. And I'm going to take that and just paint right over those petals. Since this other color underneath is a darker color, you can see it when you paint this lighter color over it. And you don't need to be exact, just add it in. Again, I'm working with one area at a time and kind of moving that paint around into the next area. I'm not pressing on the barrel of my water brush at all. I only want to release paint onto my palette. I don't want to release it onto my watercolor paper. Pick up a little bit more because my paint started to look a little light, a little lighter than I wanted. I want a little bit more pigmented than that. And then I'm going to go ahead and clean off my brush. And I'm going to mix the grass brown, which will be 1 drop of the 21H sepia. Use both the driest, darkest, and the wettest, lightest version of this color. So I'm going to pick up just a tiny bit and move it to the side here. Adding some water. And test it out. That looks like the right amount of water added. And so I'm going to clean up my brush again, pick up a little bit, dab it again, and I'm going to just add it like I see in step 4's image. Plant here. If you need a finer tip, don't forget to roll the tip of your brush. Again, don't worry about being exact. Don't worry if you get any paint outside of the lines. This is just a sketch. And there is a little bit of brown in some of the green areas, so don't forget to add that in there too. And if you want to add a little bit more, feel free to do that. This is your painting and your sketch. Every time I paint, my painting turns out just a little bit different based on my mood, maybe even the weather, what I was doing that day, how much energy I have. It's kind of a fun thing about painting and doing watercolors. I'm going to clean off my brush, pick up this darker color. Now I don't want to take out too much pigment by adding too much water, so I can test it out first and make sure it moves nicely on paper. And I feel like it's kind of catching on the paper a lot, so I just want to add just a tiny bit of water to that, make a tiny little drop. And then when I test it, it should move smoothly. So that's moving much smoother. Dab it onto my towel after picking some up. And then I want too much water. And I'm going to go ahead and add it. This will dry quickly. So this should already be dry, since we're not adding too much water to our paper itself. And if you need to check that, just make sure you dab your finger instead of wiping it, because if silhouette will smear and smudge your painting if you wipe your finger over it. But if you dab it, it'll just get paint on your finger. I forgot to put the brown on this one, but I'm just going to leave it the way it is. The lighter brown color. Just put the dark brown color over it. A little bit of dark brown there, too. I'm going to clean off my brush, let this dry, and move on to step 5. Step 5, paint in the grass red violet. And before I start that, quick tip, make sure you don't fill your water brush all the way up with water. And this will prevent from too much water coming out while you're painting, because sometimes the pressure of a full barrel can cause a lot of water to come out that you don't want. You get a little bit more control of the water this way. So first, we're going to go ahead and mix the grass red violet, be 1 drop of the cobalt violet, and 1 drop of the 28H carmine, I'm going to mix that up. I'm going to use the whitest, lightest, or most water added to it, least concentrated color. I'm going to add lots of water to it to the side and test that out. And that still looks very concentrated. So I'm going to pick some up and then just add it to the side here with a bunch of water. Dab it off on my towel and then pick some up again and test it out. That looks a little bit more like what I'm looking for, but still a little bit under concentrated, a little bit too much water. Pick a bit more up, dab it off on my towel and test it out on my test strip. I think that looks about right. Now, color mixing, just adding the water can be complicated enough, so it's great as a beginner to be able to start with the formulas. I'm going to pick up a little bit of that paint, and then I'm just going to add it to the petals and sepals to kind of add a highlight like you see in Step 5's image. And this, again, doesn't have to be exact. Just add to the same general areas. This brightens up the flower a little bit more, and you'll be able to see this in your painting more than you will be able to see it in the step-by-step instructions. A little more vibrant. Printers can't always pick up all the different colors. That's why it's so much better to have a painting. And if you get able to paint outside of lines, don't worry, it's just going to add a little more character to your painting. Again, making it perfectly imperfect. If you do want to remove some paint, you can rub your finger while it's still wet, it's already dried, or take a Q-tip to it, a little damp Q-tip, and just dab it up gently. I'm going to clean off my brush. This dry, and I'm going to move on to Step 6. Step 6, paint in the grass green and purple. So I'm going to go ahead and take some of this really dark, fully concentrated grass green, dab it off on my towel, test it out to make sure it looks right still, looks good. To me, I'm going to go ahead and pick some more up, dab it on my towel, and start adding it in like I see in Step 6. So I'm adding this sparingly, preserving some of the color underneath. And if you need to, you can always refer to your final reference image for that placement of color as well. go ahead and clean off your brush. And I feel like this is not dark enough. We didn't have the yellow underneath it. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of this paint again. This is a medium dry color. I'm going to add that in there. A few other spots that I just feel like are a little too yellow. I'm just going to add it in. And feel free to do this to your own painting if you like, if you had the same issue. Go ahead and clean off brush. And I'm going to add in the dry dark grass purple. So that's this color here. We added in the beginning. I'm going to test it out on my paper. And it looks a little bit too concentrated now. I think it might have gotten a little too dark. So as it dries, the water evaporates and it gets a little darker. That looks a bit better. So I'm going to pick that up, dab it on my towel, and I'm just going to add it like I see in step 6 and my final reference image. Still feels a little too dark. I'm going to pick up, add a little bit more water, dab it on my towel, and test it out one more time. Looks pretty good. A little too much water, dab it on my towel. I can move that water around a little bit. Pick up a little bit more, dab it on my towel. Pick up some more, dab it pretty well on my towel because I don't want a bunch of water onto my paper. There you go, now it's behaving a little bit more like I wanted it to. Again, paint outside of the edges, that's okay, just redefine those edges later. This part of the flower is darker because it's kind of like a little cup at the bottom of the flower and then the petals come out. So the light's not hitting down there as much, so it's going to be a little bit on the darker side. These petals here, some of the light's not hitting on this part of the sepals and the petals, so the edges are going to be a little bit darker. And when you have all of that purple added, go ahead and let this dry and move on to step 7, unless there's more paint colors that you would like to add at this time. So go ahead and feel free to make it your own. Step 7, add ink lines. So we'll take the smallest tip micron, the 005 micron. This is black. And I'm going to go ahead and redraw the lines I transferred in step 1, except for these lines on the petals and sepals, which are collectively called the tepals. And you can refer to either your transfer drawing or your final reference image for placement of those lines. Again, this is meant to be meditative and relaxing, so go ahead and put on a podcast or an audiobook or listen to nature, some music, whatever you prefer, whatever's relaxing to you. define spaces as well. Look here, the paint, I decided to add this extra space here because the lines didn't transfer quite right. So that's going to be a little different from my transfer image, which is totally fine. And it's going to be a little different from my reference. And then the paint landed outside the sepal here, so I can either make that a little bit wider, or I can draw right around over it and pretend it's not there at all. Just add a little bit more style to my painting, making it a bit more unique. The same thing here, I can keep this on the inside or the outside. And there I decided to make that sepal a little bit wider, which is totally fine. This is just a sketch, it doesn't need to be exact. Let's go ahead and go throughout and redraw all those lines. Next, we're going to use the 01 black micron, which is a little bit thicker tip, to go ahead and re-outline the common name, redraw the scientific name, and re-outline the green areas and some of the lines within the flower, just to thicken them up just a little bit. And again, refer to your final reference image and your step 7's image to figure out where those lines might go. And this is your sketch, so you want something to be a little bit thicker, go ahead and do that. Just make sure you have some line variation. It really will help the image just pop off the page. Lastly, I'm going to use the 08 micron, which is the thickest of the microns, to just thicken some lines throughout and parts of the seed capsules here, and to fill in the common name. Now this pen does tend to smudge while it's still wet, so make sure you don't run your hand over it while it's wet. The way that looks. So now I'm done. Great job observing your world, and keep practicing. Thank you for joining me. I hope you had fun, had a chance to relax a little. Next, we have a few things you can do with this painting. Punch holes in it and add it to your sketchbook. Frame it, gift it, maybe send it in the mail to a friend to brighten their day. Also, make sure to share it with us. We'd love to see it. Use the hashtag #NatureCreateArt to have it featured on our social media, or share it on our Facebook banner page. If you have any questions or like to see a plant or animal featured in a future lesson, please let us know in the comments below. Thank you again for joining me. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this YouTube channel, and shop for lesson crates at naturesketchbook.com.